second chapter, we're going to start reading about verse 12. So if you would turn there, and we're going to study closely together. Chapter 2. Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. Do all things without murmuring and disputing, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. Yea, and if I be offered upon the sacrifice and service of your faith, I joy and rejoice with you all, for the same cause also do ye joy and rejoice with me. I want to talk to us this morning on a topic that's close to my heart, and that's the gift of laughter. I enjoy laughing. Do you? I'll tell you what. Sometimes we laugh so we cry, but that helps us. Laughing. I like to be around people that laugh. You're enjoying the buddy. You don't like to laugh. Mm-hmm. Now we need to keep it balanced. We need to have a balanced outlook on life. And a lot of times when I go to do a funeral service, I like afterwards to walk around and look at the epitaphs in the cemetery. There's some rather unusual and humorous epitaphs. Some of the most laughable things happen in some of the most serious circumstances. I do like to read the epitaphs, and here's one for you. And this was actually in the cemetery. Here lies my darling husband, Walter. May he rest in peace until we meet again. And another one stands out in my mind. It said, died at age 30, buried at age 60. And really and truly, I thought about that, and that is an appropriate epitaph for too many Americans today. Mummification sets in on a host of young men and young women that at an age when they ought to be running at full speed, really having a wonderful time of life. All of us have a lot more to offer than we realize, and we have much longer to get things accomplished than we realize. We are in God's hands if we just really boggle our minds to realize what our potential really is when we place ourselves in the hands of God. When I think about these kind of things, I think of Benjamin Franklin. Y'all remember him, you know him. Ben Franklin, all the fires that's going on out in California. I know you've heard about those. Matter of fact, Ben Franklin started the first fire department. He invented the lightning rod. He designed the heating stove. Really, ages 31, in his 40s, 36. He was one of the first ones to harness electricity. That was at age 40. He was an economist, a philosopher, diplomat, printer, publisher, linguist. He spoke really 5 languages in his 80s, 84, I think. I bet you don't know how much formal education he had. 2 years. Some of you right now, listen to me, some of you have more sheer knowledge than Franklin had when he was your age. Far too many of us think that there's nothing left for us to do. Everything has already been discovered, and everything's happened that's going to happen, and we just don't have anything to look forward to. Nothing for us to do. Folks, that's not true. So much that still needs to be discovered and will be discovered by somebody. You and I just need to do it. Now, Ben Franklin was great, no doubt about that, but great examples and great men and women like this. Knowing about that can also be rather frustrating to us. I try to put myself in the shoes of a mother of 4 little children, trying to get them all out of bed, get them fed, get them ready to go off to school. Or that recently unemployed husband, 45 years old, and he's out looking for a job. Somewhere between panic and pressure. A lot of us do well just to find time to do the things that we have to do, much less think about inventing something. I don't know why I didn't come up with a hula hoop. I remember when I was growing up, we had barrel hoopers. Why didn't I think of the hula hoop? I could have been rich today. Or the frisbee, we had lard can lids and surf bucket lids. Why didn't I think of that? But we need to remember, really, to keep our lives, to keep things in balance. Admiration for a great person may inspire us to folks that can't enable us. Sometimes we just get overwhelmed when we're presented with a great example. If we're not careful, listen to me, we'll find ourselves making wrong responses to right examples. A lot of options for folks when they're exposed to great examples. You see, some just fake it. Just polish the image and make a good appearance. Some of you are old enough to remember. Some of you aren't. Some of you are old enough to remember back in 1990 when the music industry was faced with a scandal. How many of you remember, do I pronounce it right, Milli Vanilli? They had won a Grammy Award for the album, Girl, You Know It's True. And finally they had to confess that it was. They had lip synced the whole recording, which resulted in the disgrace of returning the Grammy. Somebody else said the Milli Vanilli scandal will only repeat itself unless audiences stop valuing image more than content. Not only do some folks just fake it, they want to hurry up the process. That's a very common technique today when we're faced with great examples. We want to hurry the process. I find that our generation, more than any generation in the past, they don't want to wait. Maturity is not even in the equation. I want what I want it now. I don't have to put off what I want until I'm 30 or 40 or in my 60s or 70s. I don't want to wait until then. I want it now. So there's faith, there's hurry up the process. And another option, which is rather common among Christians, is this. When we face an example that we feel like really we just can't achieve, not in our power to do it, we just strive harder. You remember the old song that says, just striving to please Him in all that I do? Let me ask you, is that really the Christian life? Is that really what it's all about, striving to please Him in all that I do? If the answer is not faking it, if the answer is not hurrying things up, then it must be striving harder. Folks, do you want to spend the rest of your life striving to please Him in all that you do? Really? Listen to me. But if many of us were honest, we'd have to admit now, I'm doing my best. I'm trying, but I'm just exhausted. And I've given out. I'm burnt out. I've tried so hard, I just want to throw up my hands and give up. And we're losing a lot of preachers because of that. It's burned out. Oh, I don't believe that's God's plan for us to strive for pleasing in all that I do. You see, Christ is our example, and what may be true of other examples is not true of Jesus. All other great examples may inspire, but they cannot enable. They may motivate us, but they cannot give us the power to become or to do that which we're presented with. Can't change us. But Jesus can. When Jesus comes into our lives, He makes a difference. He makes a difference. He said, if you want to live like me, if you want to be obedient to me, if you want to walk as I walk, if you want to please my Heavenly Father, wonderful, then I want to enable you. I want to give you the power to help you be all that you can be, to fulfill your potential in this life. And He enables us by His Holy Spirit. I'll have to admit, folks, I failed more than I've succeeded in a lot of my dreams. And I find what Jesus said very encouraging. And you might say the same thing as I have to say. You know, I've tried. I've been under the water. Sin has just sucked me down under the water, trying to get a breath, trying to get above water so I can just get some air, just be able to breathe. But you see, Christ not only gave us an example of Himself, but He made it possible for you and I to be an example to other people. He gives us His pattern to follow. He also gives us His power to follow that example, to follow that pattern. And guess what that does for us? It helps us to laugh. Helps us to be filled with joy. You see, life is a challenge. Indeed it is. Now that we've established the preeminent role that Christ plays in our minds, we need to see how that works out in our lives. And I want to share that with you in the moments that we have. And it brings us really back to the text this morning. Because Paul really promotes outrageous joy. All through that little book, he talks about being joyful. Importance of keeping ourselves balanced as we take on the challenges of life. And as we do this, he specifies really 3 of the most significant areas that we have to deal with in life as we strive to stay balanced. Number 1, chapter 2, verses 12 and 13 talks about balancing purpose and power. And then verses 14 through 16 talks about balancing attitude and action. And then 17 and 18 he talks about balancing seriousness and joy. So let's take that one at a time. Once again, I want to read those verses, 12 and 13. Not as though I had already back over in chapter 2. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God which worketh in you, both to will and to do of His good pleasure. Now remember that Paul is writing to Christians, dearly beloved. He's not writing to people that need to be saved. Has nothing to do with that. He's saying, listen, The idea of working out your salvation, the idea of working out one's salvation is referring to working out your faith. Carrying out that faith correctly. In other words, you and me, we as God's people are charged with the importance of obedience. Just as Christ, our example, was obedient to the point of death, so we're to carry out our purpose with that same kind of diligence. Those words, working out, is the same Greek phrase or words that's used to talk about working in a mine or working in a field. And in each case, there are benefits that allow the diligence. The mine would yield its ore. The field would yield its harvest. And Paul's point is very clear here. Listen, by working out our salvation, we bring the whole purpose to completion. We carry out our reason for existence. So therefore, we must not stop short. We're in this to run the race to the finish. The good work that God has begun in us, He's going to see it to the end. Let me give you an example. When a musician, and Susan, for instance, she has a fine composition placed before her. And that music is not the musician's masterpiece. It's the composer's gift to the musician, but it then becomes the task of the musician to work it out and to give it sound, to give it expression and beauty as she applies her skills to the composition, you see. And when they do that, the composition reaches its completed purpose and thrills the heart of those who are listening, those who are observing. Do you understand that? Do you see that parallel between working out our salvation, working out our faith? Spiritually speaking, the ultimate goal, the ultimate purpose of our lives is for His good pleasure, Paul says. Our lives are to be lived for God's greater glory, not for our own self-interest. And we're not left to do this alone. We're not left to gut it out. We're not left to strive it out. We're not left to grit our teeth so that we might do His will. Some folks live like, well, I'm going to serve God and be obedient if it kills me. And it's killing a lot of folks. Trying to do it in your own power. You see, God is at work in all of us. He's the one who gives us the strength and empowers us, gives us our diligence. He pours His power in us, and we do the things that bring Him pleasure, not pleasure. Notice that He says, for His good pleasure, not ours. And His glory makes it all for the worthwhile. But therein lies a potential conflict again, since most of us prefer to have things go our way. And that brings us back to that famous word, attitude. Balancing attitude with action. Look at verses 14. Do all things without murmuring and disputing, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. The first part of Paul's counsel is represents really the negative side, and the last part the positive. And put the two together, and it gives us that balance that we need in life. Negatively, Paul says, watch your attitude. Watch your attitude. Your attitude will determine your altitude. A bad attitude reveals itself really from two sides. And sometimes, some things we do alone, sometimes we do with others. And it talks about grumbling. And then some things we do with others is disputing. Both of these will steal your joy if you'll allow them to. And you need to expose them. Grumbling. Let me tell you what grumbling is. It's not loud and boisterous, but it's rather low tone. It's discontented, muttering. It's negative. It's muted comments, complaining and whining. And disputing is vocal, ill-natured argumentation, verbal expression of disagreements that stir up suspicion and distrust and doubt and other disturbing feelings in other people. We don't want to find ourselves in an attitude, an atmosphere of negativism where nothing but the bad side of everything is emphasized. And I'll tell you, there's some alarmists in this old world. I hope none of you are that way, but there's some alarmists in this world that worry about everything. Continually worrying about nuclear wars. We're going to have a nuclear holocaust. And they'll worry about rats getting cancer. Well, saccharin causes cancer. They fed 2,000 pounds probably of saccharin to one rat and it got cancer. And everybody's going to die with cancer. And they come up with these things like, and you think I'm crazy, but they come up with these things like, well, pickles causes cancer. Pickles causes communism. Pickles causes airline tragedies and auto accidents and crime waves. Because everybody, about 99.9% of all those folks have eaten pickles sometimes in their lives, so they're going to die of cancer. And I make pickles, so I'm scared I'm going to die with cancer. That's crazy stuff. But folks, a grumbling person, complaining person, if that's allowed to run wild in your life, you'll end up in all kinds of situations, all kinds of things. And if you ever hope to laugh again, those who genuinely wish to get beyond the doomsday mentality that pervades so much of today's culture, even among Christians, certainly in newscasts, about every conversation you get into with Christians, even today, well, next week it's going to be bad. Next week, I'm telling you, it's going to be bad next week. We don't be able to get out of the house. And if we get out of the house, we're liable to have a wreck and get killed. We may not have food. We better go to the grocery store and stock up on toilet tissue. And on and on and on and on. Grumbling and disputing. Paul says, do all things without grumbling and disputing. None of us have the right to go around polluting everybody's day with this kind of pessimism. Now, I'll admit, I have a problem with that, and all of us do at one time or another. But we need to prove to other folks that that's not the way we live. That's not our practice. Philippians 2:14 and 16 says, do all things without murmuring and disputing. I've read that. Blameless, harmless, the sons of God without rebuke in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom you are light, shining in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I will not run in vain, neither labor in vain. Folks, we live in a world of truth. Yes, I'll agree with that. We live in a world of perverts. So you and I need to model our life that's not like the majority of folks. A positive attitude makes a major statement in our crooked and perverse generation. We don't have to shout it out. We don't have to come up with a super pious appearance. We just don't grumble and we don't dispute. Had one fellow I told you about that. And every time I turn around, I'm just humble. I'm just humble. I'm just humble. Right now, I told him, just don't tell me how humble you are. Just be humble. Just be humble. All goes further and get identified really 4 startling differences between those who know Christ and those who don't. And these descriptive words make all the difference in the world for a Christian. We are to be blameless. That means purity of the life. That's undeniable. That's unhypocritical. That's free from defect. Blameless. We're to be innocent. This means unmixed and unadulterated. Inexperienced in evil. Untainted in motive. Possessing integrity. We're to be above reproach. This description is used really sacrificial, talking about a sacrificial lamb offered on the altar, and means free from blemish and lights. Actually, the term used here means luminaries, meaning we're to shine like stars surrounded by the darkness. Holding fast the word of life as we do this. No need to shout it. No need to scream it. No need to make a scene. Just shine. Just shine. Same way with the life free of grumbling and dispute. When you do this, folks, I'm telling you, you won't live your life in vain. Paul said, I did not run in vain or toil in vain. In other words, there was no wasted effort in my life. And folks, it's so easy to run in vain. So easy to wake up one morning and look back down the road of your life and see all the bad memories, all the wasted efforts. While we as Christians realize and we know we ought to, that the power of Christ working within us gives us all that's needed to make whatever impact that He would have us to make on this world and in this world. And then balancing seriousness and joy. Paul really gets down to business. Listen to me. We're fixing to get down to business in the love. Here it is. Paul said, but even if I'm being poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrifice and service of your faith, I'll rejoice and share my joy with you all. And you too, Paul says, I urge you, rejoice in the same way, share your joy with me. Paul is saying, I may never get out of this situation alive. It may be God's will that I die right here and right now. Even when he imagined that these may be his last days, listen to him, he was still able to rejoice. He refused to focus only on the dark side. He refused to allow pure death to steal his joy. He urged his friends to rejoice in that same thing. Well, that's exactly that's a balanced life. He keeps going back. Rejoice in the Lord always. And he maintained a sense of joy, a sense of humor. I've known people like that. From the midst of heartache and suffering, I didn't see how in the world they could laugh and have a positive attitude, but they did. And guess what? That encouraged. That made me want to keep on keeping on. We must not live our lives with a super serious attitude. That's not what the Lord meant when He said that we were to be grave. We're not to live like we were living in a grave now. We're to live. Paul said, Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. We can't live super serious all the time, though. We need a balance. We ought to find at least one thing every day to laugh at. Now, I know there's some exceptions, but there are few. Something every day that we can find a smile, or find a smile about, to really just have a good belly laugh about. And besides that, laughing is healthy. You know that? Frowning will create a lot more wrinkles. I look at some of you. I look in the mirror and I say, "Oh boy, smiling don't give you nearly as many wrinkles." I find out something too that smiling and laughing helps make the pain go away, or at least helps you put up with it. It'll give you a brief excursion from pain inside. And sometimes it's not real pain anyway, it's just we're being too serious. I find myself doing that. And when I get my mind off of that, get it on something a little more less serious, I don't hurt nearly as bad. Sometimes we just need some interruptions, don't we? We need to get out and take a walk. We need to get out and go get us a smoothie. Get out and go get us a Coca-Cola. Maybe I should say soft drink. Laughter will not only make our serious lives lighter, but it will help control our tongue. Don't give yourself permission to laugh sometimes. Give yourself permission to smile sometimes. I look out sometimes in the morning, on Sunday morning, I see it. You need to give yourself permission. I can smile today, it'll be okay. I'll feel better. I can laugh today and I'll feel better. Life is not perfect. I'll never be perfect on this side of eternity. Jesus was the only perfect one, so I don't have to be perfect. Sometimes I can laugh at myself. It takes practice, but it's worth the effort. What amazes me, some of us can't even enjoy a good meal like we're fixing to have right after the service. Because all them people in the world are starving today. So I can't even know what this means. Some of us can't thank God for the clothes we wear because so many people in the world are naked. They don't have any clothes to wear. Some folks can't smile because the world is so full of sadness. They're miserable all the time because of this kind of attitude. They think the gospel is good news until they obey it, and then it becomes an endless guilt trip. You see, there's leisure sinners, there's sports sinners, there's sowing sinners, there's diet sinners, there's entertainment sinners, and there's guilt sinners. And unfortunately, the last one is usually called church. Let me close by giving you a word of warning now. I know that some of you are listening to me this morning, and your flesh is yelling out inside, no, 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 no. As soon as you try to bring some balance into your life, as soon as you try to laugh a little bit and not be so serious all the time, the flesh is going to say, oh no, that's not Christianity. That's not the way life will be. You'll have a fight in your hands. And the freedom to laugh again. The freedom to bring some needed joy in your life. That's not self-agenda. It's that invisible thing that's trying to master you needs to be brought under the control of the domain of Jesus Christ, His power, and His presence. If you ever hope to laugh again and enjoy life, you're going to have to Say, Lord, I give it all to you. I give it all to you. Help me to get my life balanced. I can't be serious all the time. I don't want to laugh all the time, but I can be balanced. Here's a couple of things that I've told you. Control self-urge, take credit. When self is reigning supreme in your life, it lives for the moment of personal gratification. That's all you're looking for. Break free from that. John Wooden, the great basketball coach of years gone by, gave us some advice. He said, talent is God-given. Be young. Fame is man-given. Be thankful. Conceit is self-given. Be careful. If you hope to bring balance back to your life, then you need to realize that laughter is a gift of God. If we hope to change our habits of negative thinking that leads to grumbling and disputing, and too serious a mental attitude, we'll have to dethrone self and give Christ total control of our lives. And until we do that, we will never begin to laugh. And after all, laughter is a gift of God. And we need to enjoy it, and we need to share it. And I don't know about you, but I believe that God has a sense of humor. You don't believe that, look in the mirror. God is good. He's good to us. And He wants us to enjoy living. He wants us to be serious. He wants us to be serious. But He also wants us to lighten up a little bit. And don't see everything that's gloom and doom. Don't see everything in the world coming to an end. So what? Jesus said it was. But He said, you're a Christian and you've already won.